Hi, everyone. Welcome to Association Xchange. Today, we're going to be talking about ethics and AI. And feel free to put a hi and where you're from in the chat box. And we'll just wait for folks to come in. We have a large group of people today. Thank you all for taking time from your very busy schedules to join us today. We're very excited for this topic. Hi, Vi. Thanks for joining. Oh, Dan is from Jacksonville, Florida. Somebody else from South Florida. Hi, Barbara. Milwaukee, Bethesda, Michigan, Denver, Northern Virginia, Philadelphia. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. I see a couple of folks I know. Hello, Jeff. Hello, Patty. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, Roxanne. Hello, Frank. Well, this is exciting. I feel like we have like an around the country kind of session for us today. We'll wait just another minute so we can let people come in. We had almost 200 people sign up for this today. So thanks to everybody who signed up. We're excited to be here with you. If you're just entering, put in from where you're from. Welcome, everybody. Somebody from Harrisburg, Atlanta, another Harrisburg, another Atlanta, Chicago, Birmingham. Awesome. Well, we'll get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Sherry Singer. I'm president of Singer Communications, and we help solve associations' communication challenges. I'm also the founder of Association Xchange, also known as AXC. I'm very grateful for the 12 volunteers that I help manage who put on this free program monthly. In May, we have a program on a new benchmarking study. And in June, we have a program on mental health, checking in with association employees. How do we do that to see how they're doing? So I hope you'll mark your calendars for May or June. Look for my post on my LinkedIn site. If you're not connected to me, feel free to do that. Or through ASAE's Collaborate is where we sort of promote the monthly sessions. So welcome again, and thank you very much for being here. We have almost 100 people on today, so I hope the chat will stay active. Just a couple of housekeeping questions. We'll take your questions in the chat. We find that function works better in this environment. And also, we will have a Q&A at the end. If your question is very, very specific to your organization, I would suggest that you wait and ask Jim that question later down the line. And I'll turn it over to Leonard, who will introduce our speaker, Jim, today. Leonard.
Thank you, Sherry, and hi, everyone. I'm Leonard Greenberger. I'm a vice president at AKCG Public Relations Counselors, and I am the chair of the PRSA Association Nonprofit section, which is how I came to know Jim Hoeft, our speaker today. Jim, who's also an APR, is a member of the Public Relations Society of America's Board of Ethics and Professional Standards. He is a co-author of Promise and Pitfalls, the Ethical Use of AI for Public Relations Practitioners, which was released in late fall of last year. He's been practicing public affairs for the military since 2003. He's currently researching the ethical use of AI for detecting and countering disinformation. And he's the president-elect of this local PRSA chapter in Hampton Roads, Virginia. The service in the military and on behalf of the military is a family tradition in the Hoeft household. Jim lives in Yorktown, Virginia with his wife, Patty, who's a nuclear engineer with Newport News Shipbuilding, and his daughter is a Navy officer currently deployed on the USS John S. McCain. And finally, Jim is originally from Michigan and remains a loyal Detroit sports fan, which I mentioned in part because it gives me a chance to say, go blue. Jim, please take it away.
Hey, Leonard, really appreciate it. Thanks for that introduction. And I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to participate in this conversation. Definitely go blue. Diehard Michigan fan. Looking forward to seeing 17 or 18 Wolverines drafted over the next 3 days. So that'll be pretty cool. But you want to hear about artificial intelligence, and I appreciate your interest in this topic. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll go ahead and start off with there. Let's see if I can see the chat. If I can just get somebody to tell me that we're good to go, I would appreciate that.
You're good to go.
Awesome. All right. So let's start here. All right. Artificial intelligence. We as human beings are starting to learn, right? So the Associated Press on March 21st, 2024 said that deepfakes are just you know, generative AI doesn't necessarily have all the answers yet. We can spot them. There are opportunities for us to look at imagery and see where the mistakes are. So you've got the Pope here in his fancy dancy puffer jacket, but if you look closely, you can see that the crucifix is only hanging by one side of the chain, and that the eyeglasses themselves have some distortion. And so that was a deep fake image. It got around on a lot of the memes and stuff like that over the last 6 months or so. And so, hey, we as human beings, if we know what to look out for, we probably can identify those deep fakes, right? Well, not so fast, says the Wall Street Journal. Marketers have figured this out. So they report just a little bit later, less than a week and a half later, on April 2nd, 2024, that now generative AI may be creating the image, but the marketers are going in there and fixing whatever those deepfake mistakes might be so that it looks a little bit less like AI. So, folks, the only reason I'm putting this up here for you is that this is an emerging issue. Everybody is interested in it. We know that there's a lot of things that are going on, and we have to pay attention. I mean, this is just within the last month that this reporting has occurred. So what we're going to look at today is try to understand and be alert as to what those ethical and perhaps some legal landmines might be with respect to generative AI. That way we can use this as the tool that it's meant to be. That we can advance our businesses, advance our organizations, advance our associations in an ethical and legal way. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about PRSA BEPS and our code of ethics, so how we got started in working this particular issue. We're going to look at what generative AI is and what potentially it isn't. I'm going to talk specifically about AI and the PR pro, but it really does apply to all of us because every organization has a public relations and marketing aspect to it. We'll go into those ethical challenges that we identified in Promise and Pitfalls, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion. I probably will be going through these slides pretty quick, but stop me if we need to. All right, so we are the Public Relations Society of America. We have been around since 1947. Our code of ethics was established in 1950. We're the leading professional organization serving the communications community, but we certainly have our partners with IABC and the American Marketing Association. There's 400 professional and student chapters across the United States and also into South America. And finally, and most importantly, why we're talking today is we are guided by our code. This empowers our members' success to go forward, and we use it by within our professional development programs. You saw that Leonard and I are both accredited. That's a one-year process. In fact, sometimes some folks might say that's a lifetime process because you have to really know your stuff in order to get that accreditation. And we do the things that you do with your associations as well, networking events and leadership opportunities. So PRSA, it's big, it's been around for a long time, geared towards communicators. We've got a code and we want our folks to adhere to that. Where I fall in this organization is a member of the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards. And we recommend for all associations for you kind of have an organization that's looking at the ethics of your organization. And so 11 accredited members are appointed by the chair to serve a term of 3 years. Now, last year, believe it or not, was my first year serving on the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards, and we'll get to why that's amusing here in a second. But the point is I haven't studied Plato, I haven't studied Socrates, I am not a legal scholar. I am an APR PR practicing guy who's been doing this for the military for the last 3 decades. So, no special skills or qualifications to say that I'm quote unquote an ethics scholar, but that doesn't mean that we can't be ethical and we can't do the right thing. And so that's our code. Our code really goes to our core values. It's our principles, it's our guidelines, it's what we see as the standard for not only our organization, but the industry writ large. Now, one of the things that I think will bother a lot of PR practitioners is if, I'm not even going to say it. I think you already know, but PR has this kind of stigma around it that it is supposed to, anyway, the bottom line is public relations is meant to hold to a code of ethics. It's meant to be advocates, to be honest, to be truthful, to be loyal to our organization, to be independent. We're going to go over these traits here in a second. But the reality is we abide by this code in order to guide our behavior and our decision making. And it's just the integrity of our whole industry as a whole. Now, I want to dwell here for a second on identifying ethical behavior and identifying malpractice. Our board does still does have the right, not the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards, but the Public Relations Society of America board, if malpractice has been identified, whether through legal channels or in the media or what have you, we do have the capability of removing members from our membership. So this is what I was mentioning a second ago, our ethical values. Advocacy, we advocate not only for our organization, but we get out there into the public sphere and we talk about what is right and what is wrong in terms of the practice of public relations. It's important. It's important for us to be honest and transparent and to let folks know, regarding what the truth is regarding our organizations or what it is that we're trying to communicate. Our expertise, this falls into the accreditation, making sure that folks who are practicing public relations are skilled at what they do. They have the professional development to do it well, which enables their independence, not only to be independent in terms of providing good public relations guidance, but also independent to be able to have the backbone and the knowledge to be able to tell authority figures that what they're doing is potentially wrong. And that is an expression of a degree of loyalty, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to save that organization from potential, pitfalls, promise and pitfalls, right? Save the organization money, save the organization's reputation. So that is a degree of loyalty there. And also, our ethical values fall to fairness, to ensure that equitable communication is done in a fair, transparent way to the benefit of the organization. As long as folks practice these values, you tend to do very well. So yesterday, I decided to get a little assistance with my presentation, and we can kind of dwell on this a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what generative AI is. And so I asked ChatGPT, can you tell me in your words what you think you are? And so ChatGPT told me that generative AI refers to algorithms and models designed to generate new content, such as text, images, or music, often mimicking patterns found in the training data. These systems learn from examples that can create novel outputs without explicit human instruction, showcasing the potential of machine creativity. So that's pretty good. I appreciate ChatGPT's assistance here on telling me what generative AI is. Here's what we think it is. What we think generative AI is from PRSA is it's a type of AI technology that enables machine learning systems to create various forms of content, such, again, as ChatGPT told me, such as text, images, code, or even music. It does this in response to prompts entered by users. So there you see, I entered a prompt, it gave me text. in answer to my question. All right. Now, this again, I do not claim to be an AI expert. I have started looking into it, and it's very interesting. The folks up at MIT who are studying AI, they do a fantastic job of understanding this much better than I do. But a couple of terms that I think you're going to hear or learn throughout the years, you're going to hear deep learning and neural networks. And what deep learning is it's a computing process. It looks at patterns, looks at large data sets. Like, you're going to hear this term a lot as folks talk about AI. Data is gold, right? So you're also going to hear the term garbage in, garbage out. So your generative AI is only as good as the data that it has, to ensure that it provides you really good outputs from its decisions. You're also going to hear about neural networks. Neural networks, from my understanding, it's really a switch, okay? That gets triggered by a mathematical computation, and then from that math, like ones and zeros, bits and bytes, right? So that network either fires, it's either on or it's off. And that's the same thing that's actually going on in our brains. Like, our neurons are either firing or they're not firing in order to generate a stimulus and an output. And so, again, just the definition here, it's the way, we interpret and learn information over time. These networks learn from the data they're fed during training. Again, garbage in, garbage out. Data is key to ensure that generative AI is done effectively, accurately, and that it doesn't hallucinate. So when we think about AI, what's the promise? What are we thinking might potentially help us as a tool? Because again, that's what this is. Artificial intelligence is a tool for us to do things better. Well, it helps us in our decision making. Honestly, that definition that ChatGPT came up with for generative AI, if we go back to the previous slide, was pretty spot on. And that was generated in just a couple of seconds. And so if I look at that and I know that it's accurate, or that I presume it to be accurate, that kind of helps in terms of productivity and get things done quickly. And some examples here regarding decision making that are provided. So you can adjust your prices, you can help with your supply chain, and again, personalized marketing campaigns. A couple of weeks ago, I experimented with putting in a couple of data points regarding a fictional business here in the Yorktown area that I decided I wanted to open. Hey, ChatGPT, can you help me write a press release to amplify the announcement of this business? And what would have normally taken me, maybe 15 to 20 minutes to write, was provided in a half hour, or in 30 seconds. And I only needed to potentially tweak a couple of things based upon the prompts. So it's a tool. It can be very helpful. It can provide fresh insights. So looking at customer segments, product ideation, etc. We've seen the hyper personalization and customer experience. I'm sure that a lot of us have interacted potentially with some chat bots, or as you're going to customer service on a site, it starts off with artificial intelligence to kind of get you that information that you need as you're having a conversation with that customer service rep. And if it gets a little bit more complicated, you can put the human in the loop and you can talk to somebody. But at the initial stages of that funnel, you're going to have an opportunity to potentially get your question answered and go on with your day without waiting a half hour or whatever for a customer service representative to help you. And of course, I talked a little bit here about creativity and content generation. We saw the Pope in a puffer coat, looking all hip. Obviously that was disinformation, but you can generate some pretty interesting and cool images and graphics with artificial intelligence that are fantastic. But there may be some pitfalls associated with this, and we'll get to that in a second. So why did we address AI as PRSA? Well, it's because our leadership said that it was the right thing to do. So late in 2022, our PRSA chairman recognized that because of our commitment as an association to ethical behavior and the revolutionary nature of generative AI, it's something that we had to think about. And then, of course, our chairman talked about the popularity of ChatGPT and some of the other generative models that are out there, such as Claude and what have you, that we needed to figure out what are some of the positives and negatives that might come from this, and how can we do this in such a way that the human element is still considered as we go through the use of this tool. So it was time to get to work. Again, it was identified late in 2022 and early in 23 that we should draft this document. And so a 5-person committee led by Linda Staley, who was chair of the AI working group, we got together and we started to think about how to go about doing this. So over the course of last year, we worked it. And then by October, we were able to have a draft that went through the larger Board of Ethics and Professional Standards, then went through PRSA's board to get reviewed and approved. And by late November, we had this, which is the ethical use of AI for public relations practitioners. And you see the folks who are on there. Again, we've got a couple of lawyers who participated, a couple of educators who participated, but by and large, we're all just practitioners with a lot of experience. And so it was really kind of a lot of fun to draft this and put this together and try to figure out a bunch of use cases for us in our field as to how AI might have an impact and how we should approach these impacts in an ethical and responsible manner. And so what are those ethical challenges that come from AI? Well, we had to look at bias and fairness. I already said garbage in, garbage out, right? So we as human beings, no matter what, have the possibility of potentially influencing or injecting biases, sometimes unknown biases, into decision making. And so, as we are doing the training of AI, it's extremely important that the information that we are using is done to the highest degree of ethics, and it is the best data that we could possibly have. We've got to consider privacy implications. That we're going to look at some use cases here in a little bit where the opportunity for companies to potentially mishandle private information is rampant. Again, this is the data that you're using, and so you have to protect that data as to how you're using it. Accountability and transparency. Another thought that you have to think about when we're talking about AI. If I were to write that press release and maybe tweak it a little bit, when I send it out, should I say assisted by ChatGPT, or should it just go out on company letterhead and leave it at that? Copyright and intellectual property. We're going to see this again a little bit later, but I know that there's a lot of folks that are thinking, my goodness, can ChatGPT go ahead and churn out this great piece of art, or this wonderful article, or this wonderful piece of music, but the good data that it was using potentially came from a Rembrandt, or from an article that was written in the New York Times, or from a song that was produced by the Beatles, So maybe the best data that feeds into ChatGPT, are there going to be copyright and intellectual property issues that we have to think about? Misinformation and harmful content. I mean, it's not just nation states that are doing bad things out there. There's the opportunity for people to use these tools in a malicious way, and we have to be on the lookout for it. And also impact on employment and labor markets. So we address that as well in our Promise and Pitfalls document. And so where did we go? How did we do this? We looked at our core principles. So underneath the code, we also have core principles, and core principles, are still relevant and related to the practice of public affairs and public relations, just in general, and don't need generative AI. So we try to look and say, okay, if we have these principles and we have this definition of improper conduct in a way that doesn't use generative AI, how can we identify some potential use cases using generative AI that we can advise our members to avoid as they go through, with the use of this tool? And so one of the first provisions that we talked about was the free flow of information. And I see Tracy has a raised hand. Are we good? Okay, I will continue.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Jim. Keep going.
Yeah, so free flow of information is one of our first principles that we have underneath the code. Again, when we look at this, don't think of this necessarily in the positive, like hey, this is how you should practice free flow of information. No, what we're looking at in terms of the ethical implications is we're looking at the misuse. We're looking at how people, when they personalize messages or they're looking for quickly sharing information, what are the bad things that you could potentially do, and what should you avoid as a practitioner? And so, one of our thoughts is that folks can go ahead and automatically generate a marketing campaign. That's fine, but if you're not looking at it carefully, maybe you've got false or dated or just damaging content in there. Again, make sure you're the human in the loop. You need to validate, check for your accuracy, check for all the prompts, make sure that those are effective, and make sure that you're not plagiarizing or violating any privacy rights as you're going through that. And I'm going to kind of just cut to the chase here. I know we still have plenty of time, but the bottom line you're going to see in terms of most of our principles, human in the loop. A human has to be a participant. It can't just be, hey, generative AI, go forth, do great things. You have to make sure that there is a person who is checking and validating all of these concepts and practices that you're using with generative AI. Here's another one. This might not necessarily be relevant for the practice of public relations, but it is certainly relevant for the practice of having a firm or an association or a company or an organization that does public relations. Resume screening. Just because you're relying solely on artificial intelligence, you may not have a complete and good picture of the marketplace. So you might be unnecessarily restricting your labor pool, which could potentially get you into a whole bunch of legal issues because of your discrimination and your lack of diversity in your hiring practices because you relied solely on an AI screening method. Disclosure of information. This is by far our largest section because there's a bunch of different things that relate to the disclosure of information. And so while AI can potentially generate a huge amount of diverse content, like for example, I could ask, ChatGPT using a German surname, please generate 50 tweets that are in favor of this particular topic, 50 that would be against this particular issue, and 50 that are generally neutral. And it can give me 150 tweets in just a few seconds, all completely different and interesting and diverse. Well, this kind of presents itself as an opportunity to create false campaigns and to astroturf. So we definitely advise folks not to do that. So you can use, and if you're checking content, sure, go ahead and have your generative AI screen your content, use it like Grammarly to check for your grammar and your punctuation and what have you. That's fine to do, but one person for one piece of content, one person for one product. So if you do have an individual who wants to participate in your campaign and wants to have their letter potentially screened by ChatGPT or even created by ChatGPT, that's fine. but it has to be associated with that one individual. That's regarding diverse content. This is a little bit nuanced regarding financial data. We know that generative AI, this is like one of the things that computers does great, right? It's one of the things that we wanted computers to do in the first place, and that is, do an analysis of our financial data. One thing in the PR world that some folks, mostly unintentionally, have been able to say or do is if on a financial report there may have been data that might have been omitted. Like, oh, I didn't necessarily know that that was there. Let's go back to that and we'll correct the record, etc. That's increasingly not going to be able to happen because generative AI, or not generative AI, but AI in general, does such a good job of analyzing financial data. Omitting that financial data in your reports is almost next to impossible these days. So one thing we charge our members to do is to correct disinformation when we see it. And so if we do see that there's misinformation or disinformation that's out there, we should do everything in our power in order to correct the record. And also, as I kind of alluded to earlier, digital platforms can be flooded by fake accounts. And so the reality is that that's just a no-no. It's unethical. It's, it seems like it's common sense, but there are people who try to create fake campaigns out there. Just don't do it. This is a malpractice, and it's something that could potentially get you, removed from our association. Safeguarding confidences is another principle that's important to us. So the improper use case here is that you have a bunch of PII, a bunch of health information potentially. You put it up into your generative AI, but you don't safeguard it, and that gets out into the information space. Again, that's a pitfall. Be very cognizant regarding the information that you're putting into the information environment or into an artificial intelligence machine. And then finally, enhancing the profession. One thing that we don't want folks to do, we've kind of seen this, it's really disturbing if you look into it, but there are folks that are using public data, stuff that potentially, in photos and put up on social media like Facebook or X or, YouTube or what have you, manipulating that information and then using it for bribery or unethical purposes or et cetera. That is obviously a no-no. I don't care, what world you're living in, that's an awful thing to do. And so again, that does not enhance the profession by manipulating information and doing things of that like. So I'm going to skip through these next couple of slides because I see we're after 12:30 here already, and I just want to make sure that we can get to the end. Again, as you're all members of associations as part of this organization, I would presume that some of you, if not all of you, have an association code. Just dust it off, look at it again, and make sure that that code remains up to date and in compliance with the latest and greatest that's happening with generative AI and just AI in general. And be out there and be responsible and be advocates for your association and uphold the standards that I know all of you believe in. Here's some questions that I think as we move away from this talk that you can potentially consider in your organization at your organizational level or potentially at your association level as well. Again, fairness and bias, intellectual property and attribution, disclosure and trust, human oversight, and accountability. I mean, these are all the big ticket items that everybody's talking about right now. I wish I could give you better guidance and some better clarity and granularity on this, but the reality is the UN just passed a resolution a couple of weeks ago on AI. The European Union just came up with their thoughts and ideas regarding what AI should be, and both of these are more generic and broad in scope. I did a quick search of congress.gov the other day regarding what their thoughts were on artificial intelligence. And while there may be 700 pieces of legislation out there, the only one that's actually been enacted into law is the National Defense Authorization Act. And that's mainly to just talk about what the military can and can't do with respect to artificial intelligence. So there's not a lot of guidance out there right now coming from Congress. But again, I think a lot of this is just go back to your first principles, right? Go to your code of ethics, go to what provisions or principles you have under the code of ethics, and you can pretty much, figure it out from there. It doesn't necessarily, need to be, something new and completely different, because what is generative AI? It's a tool. It's a tool to make our life better. It's a tool to make things a little bit more efficient and effective, to make things a little bit quicker. It's not going to put anybody out of practice. Who it will put out of practice are people who fail to realize and recognize that it's a tool, and people who fail to use it in an effective and ethical way. So that's my soapbox. I just want to show you here Google privacy in their terms. This just came out a couple of days ago regarding what their privacy in terms are related to generative AI. They don't want you to mislead others into thinking that generative AI was created by a human on their systems. So disclosure, at least for Google, regarding the creation of that content is important. And again, these things are changing by the day. So keeping up on top of it is quite the challenge. So with that, that is this. I had a little help with this. You can recognize a few of those names, my co-authors here from the paper, Promise and Pitfalls. There's our QR code if you want to go ahead and check out our ethics page and everything else that we have going on, including our document on AI. And I welcome your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. I know you tried to pack a lot of information in there in a relatively short amount of time. We did have one question a little while ago that generated a lot of human-generated content questions, and I thought I'd let you weigh in. Somebody asked about AI note takers like Otter AI. Any ethical considerations that folks should be aware of when they're using using AI for that purpose? And is there anything in the policy you developed that would
So
cover that?
I really appreciate the fact that this was brought up. What I would like to say about that document that we created is that it's the first draft of history. That will be an evolving document, and there will be examples galore that are going to come up that we are going to need to consider. And as a user of Otter AI myself, it is one of those things where I was taught very early on when setting the ground rules with media and having them come in to have a conversation, with a principal. I always ask them ahead of time, do you mind if I record this conversation? Because as the PR representative, I want to go back and make sure that the reporting was done accurately, correct? And I see that the same way with Otter AI. I would just in advance be transparent and say, hey, I'm going to be using this tool. It's going to convert this conversation into a transcript. And then again, the human in the loop, I've done this several times. I go back, I screen the transcript, and I try to, ensure that it has effectively communicated what is there, because there can be some issues with the direct transcription as well. Again, I would just be upfront, open, honest, transparent. Hey, I'm doing this.
Very good, Jim. Thank you. We have another question that actually is right in line with one I lined up to ask next. Can you talk a little bit about the process that PRSA went through to develop the policy? I know you touched on it a little bit, but perhaps in a way that folks who are on this call might be able to use with the associations they either work for or with.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I definitely breezed through that. The reality is, again, we got guidance from National to go forth and conquer to our board. And our board only consists of 11 people. 11 people who are responsible for other initiatives that the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards is concerned about as well. Not the least being education and our ethics officers and what have you. And so 5 of us were identified to form an individual working group very early on in 2023. And we had a decently diverse group of individuals. So I have a military background. We had someone with a healthcare background in public relations, had a couple of lawyers, a couple of educators in there. And so really what we did is we looked again at our principles of information, under the code, and said, how can we relate these to what's happening in the AI space? And we went through that. But each of us individually took a principle. So 2 of them, two of the principles I wrote the guidance on, and then another individual took 2 principles and they wrote the guidance on, etc. So we individually started off with the process. Then we came together. We used a Google Doc to kind of synthesize all the information. Then all of us took a look at it, proofread, said, did a sanity check on it. Does this work? Does this not work, etc. Worked its way out of the working group. Then that doc again was shared with our larger Board of Ethics Professional Standards, and then that doc was shared with our association or society leadership, and ultimately was approved. So yeah, it had to go through a couple of different wickets, but just being able to work individually at first, provide it to the larger group, and then work collaboratively over the Google Doc made things pretty well, and we adjudicated things throughout the process as well.
Did you have any insight, Jim, as to what kind of review PRSA did once your group turned it over to the board or over to staff? Do you have any idea what the process was on their end?
That is a good question. I do know that obviously the legal folks as well as our communications folks had a good look at it. I know that Michelle Egan herself as the chairman, she had a look at it. That's a good question. I can follow up with you on that to find out for exactly sure. Our chairman Mark Dvorak probably has a better idea as to what happened at the association level.
Okay, we maybe have time for one more quick question that I have. And you touched on this in your answer to the first question, but this is obviously a rapidly evolving field, technology. You mentioned you're going to go back. Maybe you could talk about what is PRSA going to do in terms of going back now after this process. How often are you going to look at it, update it, revise it?
Yeah, that's well. So there's Jim Heft's view, and then there's what we're actually doing. Right now, we don't have a timeline for how often we are going to revise this. My advocacy for how often we should revise this is biannually, okay, or every 2 years. For now, I think we released it in November of last year. Right now, we're kind of doing a little bit of a roadshow of talking to people about it, and folks being advised that there actually is there are guidelines out there that they can turn to and they can think about. And so it would be kind of a quick turn for us to have something, immediately out there again this November. So my thought process is, once every couple of years, let's continue to put things out. But you know what? If something revolutionary happens, there is nothing to say that we can't put out an addendum.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. I think we'll turn it back over to Sherry to close things out.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. This was really interesting. We had such a large number of people on, really enjoyed the comments in the chat. And we're concluding at 1:45, which is our promise to everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again in May. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.